The roar of Formula Apex engines echoed across Silverstone International Circuit as mechanics hurried through the paddock preparing for the biggest Grand Prix of the season. Hundreds of engineers, sponsors, journalists, and racing fans filled the garages. Every second mattered. One mechanical mistake could cost millions. Among the crowd walked Daniel Brooks, holding the hand of his 10-year-old son, Ethan. To everyone else, Daniel looked completely out of place. He wore faded jeans, worn work boots, and an old mechanic's jacket with a small neighborhood repair shop stitched across the back. In one hand, he carried a lunchbox. In the other, Ethan proudly carried a backpack covered with racing car stickers. "Dad," Ethan said excitedly, "I can't believe we're actually here." Daniel smiled. "You earned it." Weeks earlier, Ethan had won a national science competition by designing an environmentally friendly cooling system for high-performance engines. As part of the prize, he received VIP passes to visit the Grand Prix paddock. Daniel had promised to take him. Neither expected the visit to become unforgettable. Inside Garage 7, technicians surrounded one of the championship team's newest race cars. The atmosphere was tense. The car's engine had developed an unexpected problem during qualifying. Every senior engineer examined computer screens while mechanics removed panels at remarkable speed. Standing nearby was Victoria Lawson, CEO of Lawson Performance Racing. Known throughout motorsport for building championship-winning teams, she expected perfection from everyone around her. Unfortunately, the diagnostics still revealed the same mysterious fault. One engineer sighed. "We've replaced every obvious component. It still loses power after 12 laps." Victoria folded her arms. "We race tomorrow. I don't want excuses." Nearby reporters quietly speculated that the team might withdraw. Meanwhile, Daniel and Ethan continued their guided tour. Ethan stared through the safety barrier in complete amazement. "I've never seen an engine like that." Daniel smiled. "It's beautifully designed." But, he paused. "Something doesn't sound right." Ethan looked up. "You noticed that too?" Daniel nodded almost imperceptibly. Years earlier, before opening his small repair garage after becoming a widowed single father, Daniel had worked as a development engineer specializing in advanced racing engines. Following his wife's passing, he quietly walked away from professional motorsport to raise Ethan. Very few people knew about that chapter of his life. To the world, he was simply the owner of a neighborhood auto shop. As the tour group stopped outside Garage 7, Daniel instinctively glanced toward the exposed engine. His eyes moved across the cooling lines, turbo housing, ignition system, and fuel delivery components. Something caught his attention immediately. Not a broken part. A subtle vibration. The chief mechanic noticed Daniel watching. "Can I help you?" Daniel smiled politely. "I was just admiring the engineering." The mechanic nodded and returned to work. A few moments later, one of the team's laptops displayed another warning. Power fluctuation. Cylinder imbalance. No clear cause. Victoria's frustration became obvious. "We've lost 3 hours. We're running out of time." Without thinking, Daniel quietly murmured, "It might not be the ignition." The nearby mechanic overheard him. "What did you say?" Daniel hesitated. "It may be nothing. I just noticed something unusual." Before he could continue, Victoria turned sharply. She looked at Daniel's worn jacket and grease-stained boots. Then she glanced at the security barrier. "This area is restricted." Daniel nodded respectfully. "I understand. I wasn't trying to interfere." Victoria's expression remained firm. "Stay away from this engine. Our mechanics know exactly what they're redoing." Several engineers looked toward Daniel. A few exchanged amused smiles. One whispered, "Every race weekend someone thinks they've solved the problem." Ethan lowered his eyes. He knew how hard his father had worked for years. Quietly he whispered, "Dad, let's just go." Daniel smiled gently. "That's all right. We're guests." He turned to leave without another word. But just as they reached the next garage, the race engine suddenly sputtered during another test run, sending a fresh wave of concern through more than 100 mechanics and engineers gathered across the paddock. Daniel stopped walking. He heard one brief sound from the engine that no one else seemed to notice. And in that instant, he realized exactly what was causing the mysterious failure. Daniel paused for a moment. The sound from the engine had lasted less than a second. Most people probably never noticed it. But years of experience told him it was important. He quietly turned to Ethan. "Let's stay over here for a minute." The team continued running diagnostic tests. Again, The engine performed normally for a few moments before the same warning appeared on every monitor. One engineer sighed in frustration. "We're back where we started." Another shook his head. "It doesn't make any sense." Victoria looked at the growing crowd of technicians. "We need fresh eyes. If anyone has an idea, speak now." The garage became silent. Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to interrupt. But Ethan looked up at him. "Dad, you always tell me that if we think we can help safely, we should." Daniel smiled. "You're right." He approached the safety barrier without crossing it. "Excuse me." Victoria turned. "I thought I asked you to stay away." Daniel nodded respectfully. "You did. And I have. I'm not asking to touch the engine. I'm only asking if I may share one observation." One of the senior engineers shrugged. "We've tried almost everything." "Go ahead." Daniel looked toward the exposed power unit. When the engine reached a certain speed, there was a brief vibration followed by a high-pitched whistle. "I don't think the main problem is inside the engine." Several mechanics exchanged puzzled looks. Daniel continued. "It could be worth checking the small pressure sensor and one of the flexible air lines feeding the turbo system. If that sensor is giving inconsistent readings because of vibration or a tiny leak, the engine management system may reduce power to protect itself." The chief engineer frowned thoughtfully. "That would explain why the fault disappears during inspection." Victoria folded her arms. "We already replaced major components." Daniel nodded. "I'm talking about a much smaller part. It may simply be loose, damaged, or installed under slight tension." The chief engineer looked at Victoria. "We lose 15 minutes checking. We lose tomorrow's race if we don't." She finally nodded. "Check it." Several mechanics carefully inspected the area Daniel had mentioned. Within minutes, one technician called out, "I found something." Everyone gathered around. A small airline hidden beneath a protective cover showed signs of rubbing against a mounting bracket. Under certain conditions, it developed a tiny leak that was almost impossible to detect during normal testing. The nearby pressure sensor had also become slightly misaligned because of the vibration. The chief engineer stared in disbelief. "We've been replacing expensive components." And the problem was this. The damaged parts were replaced. The engine started again. 1 lap. 5 laps. 10 laps. 15 laps. No warning lights. No loss of power. The garage erupted into applause. Victoria slowly walked toward Daniel. For a moment, she simply looked at him. Then she smiled. "It appears I owe you an apology." Daniel shook his head. "Your team solved it. I only suggested where to look." The chief engineer laughed. After 3 days of searching, one mechanic asked, "How did you notice something all of us missed?" Daniel smiled modestly. "I spent many years listening to engines. They tell you a lot if you pay attention." Victoria looked curious. "You said you own a neighborhood repair shop." "I do." "Were you always a mechanic?" Daniel glanced at Ethan before answering. "Years ago I worked in motorsport development. I left after my wife passed away. My son needed his father more than racing needed another engineer." The garage became quiet. Victoria nodded respectfully. "I understand." The following day, the team completed the Grand Prix without the mechanical issue returning. After the race, Victoria invited Daniel and Ethan into the garage. Instead of offering him a high-paying job, she offered something different. "We're starting a scholarship program for young people interested in engineering." She smiled at Ethan. "I think your father would make an excellent mentor." Daniel looked surprised. "I'd be honored." Over the next year, he volunteered several weekends, teaching students that great engineering wasn't about showing off intelligence. It was about curiosity, careful observation, teamwork, and never being afraid to question assumptions respectfully. Ethan often helped demonstrate simple mechanical principles to younger children. One afternoon, a student asked Daniel, "What was the biggest lesson you learned in racing?" Daniel smiled. "Machines don't care about pride. They only respond to careful thinking. And neither do people. The best teams are the ones willing to listen to every good idea, no matter who suggests it." Victoria, who happened to overhear the conversation, nodded. She had never forgotten the moment she dismissed the quiet single father because of his worn jacket. Years later, during an interview, a reporter asked her, "What's the greatest leadership lesson you've learned?" She answered without hesitation, "Never judge expertise by appearances." The most valuable insight our team ever received came from a humble father who wasn't trying to impress anyone. People remembered the story because a CEO told a single dad to stay away from a race engine. only to watch him identify the source of a difficult mechanical problem. But those who knew the full story understood that the real victory wasn't proving someone wrong. It was the power of humility, respectful collaboration, and the willingness to listen. Because sometimes the best solution comes from the person no one expected to have the answer.